Hey y'all, welcome to my channel. I'm Amber and today I'm going to be sharing with you my monthly wrap up for October. So let's just talk about the fact that I did start this month doing weekly wrap ups, and then I switched to reading vlogs. Now I did enjoy the process of doing a reading vlog. I am not sure if I'm going to continue on with it just because I don't know if it if I enjoy the process or if it's affecting my reading. I don't know. I kind of like doing weekly wrap ups and better just because it feels a little bit more like I'm putting a little bit space between the constant connection between my reading and social media, if that makes sense. So I probably will go back to doing that. So but I did enjoy that. But for this wrap up, I will be talking about the books I did already talk about in the first wrap up and give my thoughts here, just to kind of feel like I have everything in like one place in that sense. So just in case you may have possibly watched that, which I highly doubt, you will be hearing my thoughts again for those books. But anyways, of course, at the end of each month, I share with you my general stats. And for this month, I didn't do as good as last month reading, but it's still like up there high in the numbers. So I read a total of 8 books, and out of those 8 books, I DNF'd 3. And again, I think I mentioned this before, but I do count my DNFs as read. I know, controversial or whatever, and a lot of people may not agree with this, but I think that when you are spending like all that time reading, like 50 pages takes me about an hour to read, and I feel like at 50 pages to 100 pages you are getting a pretty good idea if you're going to enjoy that book or not, and your thoughts on it. That's just my personal opinion. I do not rate my DNFs, but I also feel like it's not gonna be like the end of the world if I count it as read for myself, because I think that when you take that time and effort, I'm gonna use it and I want it to count in my stats. That's just my opinion for that. So out of the 8 books that I read, 7 were first time reads and only 1 was a reread. 1 was owned, 5 were borrowed, and 2 came from a subscription, both being through my Scribd subscription. 3 of the books I read were through audiobooks, and 5 were read physically. And now onto my favorite and worst book of the month. Again, this was like a very middle of the road to like not so good when it comes to my enjoyment level of books. Like, I did give several books 4-star ratings, and I do not count my rereads in a part of this. So, but like, they don't really stand out as like I loved these books and like so much. So I do have a favorite of the month, but like if I was thinking of like what my most favorite books would be for this entire year, this probably wouldn't really be up there in that list. So anyways, my favorite of the month was Blackwater Sister by Sensho, which I will talk about when we do my actual reviews, of course. And then my worst book of the month was Ace of Spades, which I know, horrifying, shocking. I am really sad about this because I really was expecting to enjoy this. I've been hearing so many good things about this, and I'm just as disappointed and sad about it as I'm sure you are. But that's just the way the dice rolled or whatever for me this month. But yeah, before I actually get into what I read, this past week was like the worst reading experience for me. So like I gave myself a break like mid-week, which is why I think in part I didn't really read as much as I normally have been recently, number-wise. But I tried to read Know My Name by Chanel Miller at the beginning of this week, and it was quite hard. It can, especially, like it took a lot of emotions for me. And like this is a book I am still compelled to read. I want to read it, which is why I found a way to get the audiobook version of it so that I can just listen to it, which may make it worse because I know she does narrate the story herself. But I will be spreading this out throughout the month and just read like a chapter or two a day type fashion, just so that I don't overattack myself. Because I just feel like this is gonna take a lot of strength for me not to like want to like throw something. Because I was already starting to feel like super angry and emotional over that, like because I was just like where she was like talking about like what was going to happen. And I knew like I had already kind of like known like the basic and the basic gist of like what was going to happen to her, but not in like what happened to her in the moment, but like the fallout, the when it comes to like the case and how media treats victims, and everything and like everything like that. Like I kind of knew, but it doesn't stop me from being like enraged over it, and it like evoked a lot of strong emotions. And not just reading it physically, like what is it gonna be like for me to read it, listening to her actually speak her story out to me. So I'm not ready for it. I'm not prepared for the emotional toll that this book is probably going to take out on me, take out of me. But I feel compelled to hear her story. I have not read books that are talking about people act like nonfiction, telling their story. So we will see where this goes throughout the next month. But yeah, that's really all all that like that's like the one book that I did start and try throughout the month. Now, how I'm gonna be doing my monthly wrap up is I'm gonna be going through my from like the worst to the or the lowest rated to the highest rated, I should say. So we're going to start with my DNFs for the month. And the first one is The Palace of Illusions by Shitra, Banerjee, Devakaruni. This is an Indian myth retelling about a princess who was literally born out of fire. And we see her as she gets married to these 5 brothers, and her experiences through all of that. So what I will say is that this book was just kind of like boring and blah to me. There was nothing that really made me feel compelled to continue reading. I never could fully engage in what was going on. I felt a lot of that came from the fact that this book was told a little too linearly in a way. Like we start the book as she's young, like years before she even is married. And I get like what she was trying to do, like she was trying to like give you the backstory, and I understand that, but for me, I was more interested in the actual marriages. And what is interesting was that like she hears this prophecy about herself and these marriages, and I thought what would have made this book a little bit more compelling for me personally is if like the story had started with that prophecy, and then we see her in her marriages, and then her reflecting back on that prophecy and everything that like got her in this situation kind of thing, and then as we see her living her present life in these marriages. So like that's just like how I had pictured it and imagined it in a way. And it was just kind of like one of the things where like the way that it was told just wasn't matching what I had wanted from it. But I don't know. It just wasn't the book for me. I think this is a book that many people would probably enjoy, especially if you do like myth and myth retelling type stories. This would be something that you would probably enjoy. Just this is like my first book that is a myth retelling, and just wasn't what I was hoping for, I guess. The next book that I DNF'd was The Winter Duke by Claire Eliza Bartlett, and this one is a polar fantasy where you have a palace that is like made out of ice, and there is a water kingdom that is like in that underneath them, like in the lake. And this is about Akata, who's like the 14th or 13th in line to the dukedom, and like her siblings are just constantly trying to kill each other just so that they can become the duke themselves, which I'm like, why would you even want to? Which Akata has similar feelings. She doesn't really have any desire. She doesn't care. She just wants to get the hell out of there. She wants to go to university and study, and she is expecting and hoping that this is the time that she's going to, as her eldest brother is about to be announced as the next duke. But then that night, everybody of her family except for her ends up being put under a sleeping curse, and she is forced to become the duke. Now, there's a lot of things that I actually felt like this book had going for it. There was this whole like magic system that was fascinating to me, because it's not like what I feel like is typical in a sense. Like, it's more of like a commodity rather than something that you're born with, or like you have to have power inside of you in order to like have magic, that kind of thing. It's like something that you can, it almost feels like it's the magic is created, and the Water Kingdom has it, and like her kingdom and that kingdom trade magic, and like there's this whole thing surrounding like the fact that her father is like not trading as much as he once did with them, and there's like this whole thing surrounding that, and it's like, why was he? But we don't even get that. We had this whole curse. We barely, like, I read like 35% through this book. I was 150 pages in, and it's only like 400 pages. And like we barely had like a blip of a scene of her like trying to figure out what this curse could possibly be. And then like there's this whole thing that happens with like her being in a marriage. I put that in quotations mark because it's not fully a marriage situation yet. And like that, like the one time where she actually takes action of her own accord, and all of these things get overrun, pushed to the side with the humdrum of running a kingdom. Like, this book was boring and tedious to work through, and every time I thought something was going to really start going, it got pushed to the side by her needing to do this, needing to do that. And it wasn't even like the politics, it was just like the humdrum of running a government, and it got very repetitive, and it just got to the point where I was just like, I'm over this. I can't. Like, there's just so many things, like the fascination, like she finally was able to like go into the Water Kingdom, because if you're not the Duke, you're not allowed to go. And it was like, that was so fascinating, and there's like all these fascinating and interesting, and this book should have been exciting and fast-paced and enjoyable, and instead it was this boring, humdrum, tedious work, which is just so sad and disappointing, because there's a lot going for it if it had been written in a different way. So that was my second DNF, and here we go. The last book that I DNF was Ace of Spades by Frida Abike L. And I apologize if I pronounced any of that wrong. But this one is about these two students who are the only Black students in this very white, preppy, Richie Rich type school. Imagine Gossip Girl, which there's a lot of parallels between this school and Gossip Girls. And they are starting their final year of high school, and they're, surprisingly enough, we have Devon and Shamika, and surprisingly enough, Devon is put up as head boy, and not surprisingly, Shamika is put up as head girl, which means that they're both in the running for valedictorian. But on the same day that that happens, this mysterious texter named Ace starts spilling out secrets from both of them. And they end up having to work together in order to figure out who is behind Ace and why they're doing it, and figure out how to defeat them once and for all so that they can finish their high school. So this is, I cannot really talk about the issues of this book that I had with it without spoiling. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about what I didn't like that's not spoilers. And then if you do not want to hear any spoilers from this book, I would just skip until I'm done talking about it. But I didn't like the whole high school drama as thing about it. Like, this was a little bit more compelling than, say, Gossip Girl, which is so, it feels super superficial, shallow. There's a lot more like social commentary that was going on here, and I get what the author was trying to do here, but I don't like that high school drama. And there's a lot of there's a very close parallels between Gossip Girl and this book, as in like the lack of parental presence, and like the fact that they didn't seem to know what was going on in their children's life. Maybe even like, okay, I will say this: Devon's mom, like, we meet Devon's mom when we meet Shamika's mom, but like especially for Devon's mom, like I felt like she only existed for the sake of another reason for why Devon didn't want to come out. So like he believes that his mom is homophobic and would kick him out. I do not know if that's true or not. I kind of got a different vibe from the way that he said something, but I didn't finish the book, so I do not know. But like, she didn't feel like she was her own character, her own person, and that she only existed for that one thing. So like, it's kind of like how Gossip Girl, like all these parents seem completely clueless about what their children are doing, or they just don't care. I'm just like, they seem like they care, they're supposed to care, but they don't actually care. And how in the world is every single one of these children getting away with this kind of shit that they get away with in Gossip Girl? I don't know. I never liked Gossip Girl because of that. Like, there's just a lot of things. It's just too much shallow drama. This doesn't have that, but it was still kind of like teenagers, you know, that kind of feeling that I get that. And I also felt like Shamika was way too self-aware for her age. Like, and I think it didn't help with the fact that the author was constantly explaining Shamika's motivations, or rather having Shamika explain her motivations, which made her sound like a very self-aware, like 20 to some 30 years old type person. Like, and also that made me feel like she didn't trust the reader to be able to understand the motivations through the actual plot and storytelling. So there's that. But like, there's a lot of things that I did. I liked Devon, and I liked like how she was able to like create these very three-dimensional, very realistic teenagers. Devon and Shamika felt very real. Other than the fact that Shamika seemed older than she actually was, I felt like I knew them and could understand them, and like I felt a lot for Devon. Like, from where we had read, like a lot of the secrets that was coming out was dangerous for him to have coming out, and like I felt for him the most because like it was just not fair, not right, and it was completely and utterly cruel. So like, now we're gonna go into spoilers. So I'm gonna have my hand up and try to skip when I put my hand down if you do not want to be spoilers. The main reason for why I DNF'd this book is because I could not get my mind around who was behind Ace. So Ace is a group, is a secret society. So like, this whole thing is overcomplicated. I don't understand the point of the secret society. So apparently this is a secret society that every 5 years purposely will enroll two black students and will like lull them into a sense of complacency for their first 3 years, and then in the final year they will torture and bully them out of school. And they like literally have summer camp to like brainstorm all this. This is what I got from like reading like spoilers, and like I tried to get to this point, but I couldn't. And that even teachers are involved in this. So this is why I'm like, okay, what was the point? What is the point? If you did not want Black students of color in your school, why even bother having them there in the first place? Just don't. I don't know if like they do this because at one point they were like drawing attention to the fact that they were exclusively only enrolling white students, and that was brought to their attention. So now they do this in order. I don't know, because again, I didn't really get to that point yet when I DNF'd, but it doesn't make sense. Am I missing something in that aspect? Two, again, like I said, it's overcomplicated. So why didn't the teachers just like dock their grades and then like pressure the students' parents to like just kick them out, to not kick them out, but to like transfer them to a different school? What would make more sense to me, for this to make sense to me, the logic of this whole thing of who Ace was and everything, was say that the school had been pressured to, like, this is the first time they've been, at the beginning of this book, the school had been pressured before the school semester year to start enrolling students of color, and they're like, okay, fine. So they enroll these 2 students just to like the bare minimum, you know, of like, see, we're enrolling people of color, we're being diverse, and then these students are like, how dare they like challenge the status quo, or like, how dare they try to like belong. So they, when they realize that they're going to be bringing in students of color, they decide to come together to like scheme on how they can force these students out of school, because like, how dare they like try to like belong here, you know, that kind of jazz. Like, that would have made more sense to me than this whole like overcomplicated secret society that purposely enrolls just so that they can torture them in this way. Like, it does not make sense, especially as there's an easier way of doing it. So it's like, this whole thing does not make sense, and I don't like the high school drama part of it. I was just really feeling frustrated with the story and the plot, and like, I was hoping that I could get to like that point, because we do find out who is Ace like the halfway point, and I really wanted to get there just to like see if like it got better, but I couldn't stomach anymore. Like, maybe at some point I will read like the last part, because apparently there is like an author's note or something where she like talks about like why she wrote the secret society the way that she did or something. Like, I get that she was trying to make a point, and then I can see like the general point about like how the whiteness of everything, and like how that definitely does not create a safe space for anybody who is not white coming into that place, and how it just makes it even harder for them to succeed in a lot of ways. So like, I appreciate what she was trying to do, and I think the message is very important and needs to be talked and discussed, and people need to educate themselves on why we need to be creating safe spaces for people who are not white, because they're never going to feel safe if we aren't doing that. But like, this book, story and plot wise, does not make sense, so I DNF'd it. And we are done with spoilers, so hopefully you are back with me. Now on to my 1 2-star rated book. This is the first book that I talked about in my weekly reading wrap up. So if you watched that, you will probably know that I had rated it 3 stars, but I did also mention that I was thinking of going lower, which I did go lower. So this is about Darcy and Elle, who are set up on a blind date with each other by Darcy's brother, who also happens to be Elle's business partner. And the date goes just bad. And Darcy's brother ends up asking her how it went, and Darcy, who is fed up with her brother constantly putting his nose into her love life, lies and says that it did go fine. And of course, Elle finds out and confronts Darcy, and Darcy begs her to please play along. And since this is like around the holidays, Elle kind of reluctantly agrees to play along and like convince her brother that they're dating, as long as she will help her get through her Thanksgiving holiday dinner with her family. And they both agree that it will end at the end of New Year's Eve. So this has a very Hallmarky vibes. If you know those films where they fake date, you know what I'm talking about, but making it sapphic. And if the thing that really just bothered me hadn't been a part of this book, I would be giving this 4 stars. I really enjoyed their romance. The chemistry was, and I just was very invested. As you know, like romances, you know where it's gonna go. You know how it's gonna end. So if an author can really make you connect with those characters and their romance, that is amazing and wonderful. And she did all that. But I will say that story-wise, it did get a little bit rushed. I felt like there's like it was very convenient how Darcy, there's a person that is from Darcy's life that just randomly shows up, ends up creating conflict between the two, and then magically disappears. And I'm just like, and there's like, you don't see like the fallout of that between her and that person at all. And I just didn't like that. And again, like I said, the ending did get a little rushed. Why this book only gets 2 stars is not only the fact that she referenced Harry Potter, which made me very uncomfortable that she does do that. And I don't think that she has any excuse for doing that, especially because she seems aware of like social media. She talks a lot about social media. So like, she does seem like she would be a person who would be on social media enough to know that J.K. Rowling is a TERF and it has been causing harm to the trans community. So talking about Harry Potter and referencing it is showing support and promoting this author. So it made me very uncomfortable that she did that at all. And it makes me feel that she either is okay with her transphobia, or like very small part of me wants to like give her the benefit of the doubt, but it's less like, I don't think so. And also I just found it kind of weird as somebody who's writing a sapphic romance to be, and I know that transphobia can exist in the LGBTQ plus community. I get that. It doesn't stop it from being weird to me. I can't understand it, and I just think that like just having references there, like how if somebody who's reading this is somebody who has been affected and impacted by Rowling's actions and words against the trans community, you could be causing harm to that reader. It was just all sorts of uncomfortable and weird, and I didn't like that. And even without, like, if Rowling wasn't a TERF and all of that, the fact that she has so many references to Harry Potter, especially in the first third of the book, and then they just poof disappears, like we don't have any kind of references the rest of the book, makes it very clear to me that she was doing this because she didn't feel like her book could stand up on her own, and it felt like she was using the popularity of Harry Potter in order to get readers, to hook readers in, and then, you know, because she just completely stops. I'm just like, if you feel like your book can stand up on its own without riding the coattails of someone else's success, then maybe like take a pause and work on your book a little bit longer. So it does. It would have bothered me with how heavy the references were, even with my previous love of Harry Potter. Like before, like it would have bothered me then. I'm like, why do we need so many references? It was very heavy-handed and way too much, in my opinion, even without the uncomfortable and problematic aspect of her referencing it at all. But anyways, so I did get that 2 stars for that reason. Then I rated one book 3 stars, and that one was If I Had Your Face by Frances Shaw. This one is about these women who all live in this one apartment complex in Seoul, South Korea. 4 of them live in like the upper floor and 1 lives below. And we're seeing their lives and creating friendships with each other. So says the synopsis. Like, okay, the synopsis leads you to believe that this is about these really just 4 women, 3 who live on the upper floor and then 1 that lives on the bottom below them, and they're creating this friendship. But there's 4 women really. 2 are room, you know, they're each like there's each woman, like 1 woman has a roommate each between them, you know, if that makes sense. Like 2 are roommates, like 2. I don't know how to say that right. But anyways, and it's really like, yes, one of them you really get to know through the perspective of someone else, but like you know them. And so it's really about these 4 women who live on the same floor, are roommates, with each have a roommate that we get to know. And so like they all already know each other, and Wona, who is the woman who lives below them, is kind of like very isolated. Like she doesn't even meet them until like basically the end of the book. So one right off there, like I didn't understand Wona's purpose in the story because she doesn't meet them. Her perspective didn't really feel like she had space and time enough in the book at all. Mainly because like even when you were reading someone else's perspective when it comes to those 4 women, you had the other characters in there, so it felt like you were getting to know all these other characters with in and out of their own perspectives, if that makes sense. Whereas Wona was just completely isolated, like she just got left behind, and I felt so bad for her. Like, why did you even create this character and have her as part of the story if she wasn't going to be a vital point? So this is more about like each of these person's life, and there's no like central plot to like pull them together really until like the very end, which it still doesn't make sense. Like, and there's like, okay, so like in the synopsis we have, I think her name is Kyuri, Kyuri, so I apologize if I pronounced that wrong. She's a room salon girl, and like the synopsis makes this idea that the whole like thing is gonna be centered on this mistake that she makes, but the mistake that she makes doesn't happen until like over the halfway mark, and then it's like pretty much resolved like pretty quickly. And this book just didn't feel complete. Like where these characters leave off is where they began, and there's like small changes that were about to happen. Like I feel like we were just about to see the story begin with these characters, and then the book ends. So like I didn't understand the point of this story, of this book. I don't feel like the synopsis is accurate fully, and like I don't understand. I'm very confused as to like what's the purpose of the plot itself. Like I get the meaning behind the title, I get like all of that, but it just felt very lackluster. What I did like was how 3-dimensional and real these characters were, which is why I finished this book in the first place, was because I was so compelled to know these characters. So like she knows how to write characters and everything, but the story itself it does not make sense to me. I'm still right like now trying to understand like why did we read this book? Like why did we have these characters? Where was this book going? Because it didn't seem to go anywhere. There was just like nothing. So I'm just like really heartbroken over that because I really enjoyed these characters. But I feel like this book needed to be longer, it needed to be more developed, the plot and story needed to be more developed, just to make it make sense to me. Anyways, I read 2 4-star rated books, and the first one was Blackwater's Sister, and this is by Sun Cho, And this is about Jasmine, who is moving back to Malaysia. Her and her parents immigrated to the U.S. when she was a toddler, and now as an adult, I think she just graduated from college, like maybe like a year ago. It seems like she's recently graduated from college. She doesn't really know what she wants to do career wise. Her family has hit a financial situation where they, they're financially like unstable, and she's closeted, so she's kind of like floundering in a small sort of way, big sort of way maybe even, and so they're starting the process of moving back to Malaysia, when and they do move to Malaysia, I should say, but when she starts hearing her Ama's voice, which she doesn't at first know that is her Ama, and she chalks up to like the stress of the move, but then the more that she hears his voice and the more that she starts to learn, the more she realizes that it's her Ama, and her Ama wants her to help her get revenge against this gang boss who has insulted her god. And so we see Jasmine having to go face to face with gangs, thugs, and spirits, and even her own Ama, and even gods. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I enjoyed listening to it. I liked the style, and I liked the banter between her and her Ama. There were sometimes when I was a little bit frustrated with her, but I feel like this whole book was more about like her finding her own strength and her own bravery, and feeling ready to take a stand for herself and who she is as a person. So I really enjoyed the process of this reading. I enjoyed the story. I do think that I need to read this physically because I feel like at times I was disconnected a little bit here and there, and I think that if I had read it physically, I would feel like I had been more engaged in this story, which is why, like, even though this is my favorite book of the month, I feel like it's like not like something that I would say is my actual like favorites out of the entirety of the books I read this year. It's like more of a middle, in that like it's enjoyable, but it's not like one of my like top 10 of the year type thing. I think it's a very strong book. It has a really compelling characters, great dynamics between her and her Ama. I really enjoyed or rather, it was very like interesting to see like her as a daughter, like seeing her parents in a different light. Like when they were in the US, like she always had thought that her parents were very shy and just like not like homebodies, but when they move back to Malaysia, she sees them in a different light. They're more gregarious, more talkative. They want to hang out, they want to go out, and then that's when she comes to realize that the immigration to the US had like caused them to like shut down slightly because they just didn't have anybody who they could connect with, and that that immigration had not been as easy or done them well. And so like we also see like how that has put a lot of pressure on Jasmine, in the sense of like she feels like this huge obligation to her family, which causes strife in her own personal life and with her girlfriend. So like she is like struggling with like her love and that sense of obligation that she has to her parents because of all that they sacrifice, etc. So I found that really interesting to see, and the fact that she feels like an immigrant herself now, because like she feels that like she doesn't really know the languages very well, so she feels like the tourist, that stands out like a sore thumb type thing situation going on there. So that was kind of like interesting to see that being played out through the story too. So overall, there's just a lot of like really interesting elements to the story. I enjoyed it overall. but it's not. I don't think this will be as memorable as some other books I have read. So, anyways, that is that one. And now on to my last 4-star rated book, which is When the Stars Go Dark by Paula Mclean. This one is the other book that I talked about in my previous wrap up. And this one is about Anna, who's a San Francisco detective who works specifically with missing person cases. And when a tragedy hits in her personal life, she ends up going back to her like childhood / teenage home, more like teenage home, because she was quite older when she like the majority of her childhood, I would say, of Mendocino. And when she was going up there, one of her friends had gone missing and ended up murdered. And now, within the first week of her being there, she realizes that there's another teenage girl that has gone missing, and she finds herself getting caught up in the search for this person, and is working with one of her childhood best friends, who is also the sheriff now. Mainly because she feels like there's a connection between this and her friend that had gone missing and murdered. So I overall really enjoy this. I think this is Paula Mclean's first like mystery thriller novel, and that does show in a way. And it is predictable in the sense like I kind of knew who it was pretty shortly after Anna has started the process of investigating this missing person. But I really enjoyed the writing, and I really enjoyed the exploration of Anna's grief and pain, and the healing process, not just from her current grief, but also the process of trying to find healing from her childhood traumas, through this investigation. I did find it frustrating how sometimes I felt like she put too much of her own personal experiences onto this missing person. Like, it's like, yes, you're similar, but you're not the same, and you need to like separate your personal emotions from the actual, because it felt like a hindering incident that got a little bit frustrating. But at the same time, I just really enjoyed like the process of seeing her like investigate, finding these things out, and then actually like the actual conclusion of the story. So overall, I just really enjoyed the process of reading this. There's really beautiful writing, very great characterizations, but just predictable and a little bit frustrating because of certain things. But overall, like I said, I give this 4 stars. My last book that I read this month, which was also a reread, was The Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien. I finally finished this book. Finally. So this one, it took me a lot longer. Like, I was expecting to be finished with the Lord of the Rings last month, but things happened. But I finally finished it. This was my only 5-star rated book of the year, of the month, I should say. But yeah, I did finish it. So I have talked way too long, longer than I was expecting to have talked, but I did it. I finished my wrap up. I'm definitely going back to weekly wrap ups because there's no way that I'm going to let myself talk this long ever again. But anyways, those are everything. I would love to hear your thoughts, especially on Ace of Spades. If you've read this book all the way, I would love for you to like help me understand the whole secret society thing. I just realized that I talked about the spoiler, but I am not doing this over again. So anyways, I would love to hear your thoughts, and thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.